Which position battle are we watching for this Saturday's 8A game? We'll tell you on today's Locked On Auburn.
Freezing temperatures are likely for several hours inland and a few hours closer to the coast.
Yes.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Joining me as he does every single Monday, Lindsay, Crosby, writer at auburndaily.com, also the host of Locked On MLB Prospects. It is A-Day week, Lindsay. We thought it would never get here, but this spring is flying by. And just a quick note to everyone. There's a lot of people that say A-Day doesn't mean anything, and there's a lot of people that says A-Day means a lot, when the reality is somewhere in the middle. So we're going to kind of detail that process throughout this week. Today's topic about A-Day that we're tackling is what's the biggest position battles that we are most excited to see. And Lindsay, you and I were chatting beforehand, and I think linebacker is the place where we need to start because it's the position group where throughout these scrimmages, throughout these media viewing windows in practice, it's the position group where we've seen the most amount of faces taking reps with the ones. I mean, it's kind of a wide open thing where you look at the linebackers that transferred in, Will Tolan from LSU, he's wearing number 0, or number 12, Austin Keys, the transfer from Ole Miss. That's kind of the guys that we expected, Lindsay, going into spring. But lately we've heard a lot about Wesley Steiner, number 32, and number 17, Woodyard is another guy that we've heard so much about that is kind of making a late run. So I think who they trot out first will be really, really interesting to see.
Yeah, and it's something, I mean, I've talked about this a ton on this show. The room wasn't good last year, right? I mean, you had the number one player in the room, Owen Pappoe, leaving for the NFL. And
right.
So you've got, you had Steiner and Riley. You saw snaps come away from those guys at the very end of the season and kind of be redistributed to some other guys. I do think that, obviously, you brought in Tolan and Keys for a reason, but I don't think, and it just correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like with this coaching staff, nobody's guaranteed a position. Nobody's guaranteed a starting spot. And so they're going to have to show that they've picked up this defense and that they can do what Hugh Freeze and Ron Roberts are looking for to make this happen.
Yep. And
I think a lot of people, because he didn't play a lot last year, I think a lot of people are kind of writing off Wesley Woodyard. He feels Robert Woodyard.
Woodyard. I do that all the time. Yeah. I do that all the time.
Robert Woodyard feels. I mean, he's so underrated. We don't even get his name right. It just feels like he's a guy that doesn't necessarily get the attention that he deserves. And I think he's going to be a true a tone setter in that room.
I'm with you. And just who they dress out, as starters and who they dress out as the twos is going to be telling, because I think that's the only way to kind of say this is the current pecking order with all of this. And people get so upset when I'm like, yes, there is a pecking order. And they're like, well, Hugh Freeze says there wasn't. And I'm like, well, there's going to be starters and there's going to be a second team on Saturday. Sorry, you got to deal with that.
Like clarifying, Hugh Freeze says there's not a pecking order, as in there is not a written depth chart distributed to the media that says this guy is first team, this guy is second team. But when you send players out to play the game, everybody can't go at the same time. That's what we're talking about when we say a pecking order. It's literally who gets to go first.
Yeah, and the team's aware. I mean, I've talked to players that were upset that we're starting earlier in spring, and then they were upset when they were not starting later in spring. So I mean, it's discussed. So get out of here with all of that. And sure, you want to say it's semantics. That's cool. I don't care. Whatever. But there is a first team and a second team.
To address that real quick, in the words of Braves third base coach Ron Washington, if you don't like it, play better.
Yikes. BravesToday.com for more Braves content right there, Lindsay Crosby.
We got you.
Yeah, and then like Cam Riley, number 13, is a guy that we thought could possibly take the next step, but we just haven't seen anything or heard anything from Cam Riley, which I think is really, really telling. All right, so my prediction is the first two guys out there are Woodyard and Steiner which may ruffle some feathers, but that is my prediction. I think Tolan may be a starter, but I think he is a game plan piece. I don't know if he's going to be a guy that you roll out in your base. I think you may, if you're playing a more athletic quarterback, he may get more reps, or you may ask him to cover a little bit more, or if you want to have more of a blitz heavy type situation, I think you may put him in more and he may play like a starter, but I think he's going to be a game plan piece in a Ron Roberts defense. So I think the first two guys out there as we record this Sunday evening is Woodyard and Steiner. The next position group, Lindsay. Yeah.
My prediction, I think it's going to be Woodyard and Keys.
Okay.
And it's something where it's like just based on what we've seen in spring and kind of based on the fact they went out and they got both of those guys. And I feel like they got like Austin Keys, to me, feels like the one that they went out and got for a reason. They pictured him in the defense. So I've got Woodyard and Keys with, again, like you said, using Tolan in kind of a rotational, situational kind of setup there.
I think that makes sense. And when you look at eligibility left, Tolan has more time. Keys an older player. So There you go. There you go. Once again, Keys is number 12. That's going to look a little weird, I think, for some Auburn fans on Saturday. The next one is the wide receiver group. We won't spend as much time talking about this because I think we've really just drilled this into the ground. But I think the groupings that we see for wide receiver and the quarterbacks that are throwing to them will be super, super telling, especially if they limit Camden Brown. I think there's a few reasons to limit Camden Brown, who is wearing 4 this year. It's not Tank Bixby, it's Camden Brown. But a few people have seen him where he's nicked up his ankle. I think he was in a boot, but he practiced the next day, so it's not a big deal. But how precautionary do they want to be with him? We'll certainly see. But if that's the case, then we'll see 2 through 4 or 2 through 5, depending on the sets that they're in. And also who's slotted at certain spots. Can Koy Moore play inside and outside? Can Landon King move to the inside? How are they going to use certain players? I think that's going to be more interesting than the order for wide receiver, just because I think a lot of this room leaves, Lindsay. I think there's going to be several of these guys that get processed because they're going to want new wide receivers to come in. But if there are 3 wide receivers, my prediction is you'll see Camden Brown, number 4, Koy Moore, number 0, and Nick Marnder. I can't wait for a lot of people to see Nick Marnder for the first time wearing number 8. And if there's 4 wide receivers, I think it's those 3 guys, then Javarius Johnson at number 6 at the opposite slot, opposite Koy Moore.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of argument there on which wide receivers. I think the big thing for me, you touched on it, is how often do you see 3 versus how often do you see 4? You've got these tight ends. They bring in Rivaldo Fairweather, who's been on the field a ton in spring. I've heard good things they've had to say about Micah Riley-Ducker. And so how much do you see 4 receivers and a back versus 3, a tight end and a back, versus 2 receivers, 2 tight end in the back? So for me, Brown, Moore, Marnder, that makes sense as far as the order, but I want to see how often are we actually in 4 wides? How often do we have multiple tight ends on the field? And then do we try to throw from those multiple tight end sets? And do we try to run from the 3 or 4 wide receiver sets? That's what I'm looking for, I think.
Yep. And I think you can make the argument for seeing all sorts of things on Saturday. So can't wait to see that. All right. Who's the number 2 corner? And also, why aren't we talking about quarterbacks? We'll tell you in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Lindsay, I know if you're watching or listening, you probably know that Built Bar is the best protein bar in the world. The Built March Madness bracket is wrapping up. I think there's still time for you to vote and win a bunch of cool stuff. Head over to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorite, whether it's a bar, whether it's a puff. If you vote, you can get a free box of Built. 50 lucky Locked On listeners will do that. And also 1 Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to their door. That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. And if you get the churro box, you can invite Lindsay over and y'all can just eat churros together. It'll be very, very fun. Very, very fun. So head over to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff. And thank you so much to Built Bar for partnering with the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Lindsay, the number 2 corner. I love DBs, specifically cornerbacks. DJ James, number 4. He is him. It's who's going to be opposite of him. And this has become a closer battle than I expected it to be. Largely not because I thought Pritchett was great, and I think Pritchett's better than a lot of people think he is, but I wasn't positive Keontae Scott and Kayin Lee would be outside corners, but this staff likes them as outside corners. So to me, who trots out first opposite DJ James and who runs reps with the second team is going to be very, very telling. Nehemiah Pritchett, number 18, obviously was the guy last year. And now Kayin Lee, who's number 3, once again, he's going to kind of make his Auburn debut. A lot of Auburn fans are going to get the chance to see him for the first time. He'll be wearing number 3 on the field, number 1 in our heart. I think Keontae Scott, we all know and love, number 6, kind of going to play more of that outside role. And normally JD Rim would be in this conversation, but he's out and appears to be out for the remainder of spring, which is a total bummer. But yeah, the pecking order of this one's going to be fun too, Lindsay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go. And this is one of those, if there was not a change in coaching staff, I'd feel pretty confident, money-wise, in saying, yeah, Nehemiah Pritchett's the guy, because he was the guy last year. Yeah. And we all know how coaches love to reward the veteran with the token honorary start or the first team reps or whatever that stuff is. And so
sure,
it would make sense. Larger frame. He has that outside frame, 6'1", 180 or so. And again, the experience. But there's a very good argument to be made that Kayin Lee and Keontae Scott have different talents they can bring in. Lee is the interesting one to me because only 5'11", and that's only 5'11" on the roster, which means he's probably actually 5'9.5" or maybe 5'10". Yeah, kind of how this works. And so I'm curious to see how interchangeable some of these smaller, relatively speaking, guys like a Kayin Lee, like a Keontae Scott are with your outside receivers who are bigger. I'm sorry, your outside cornerbacks who are bigger, theoretically a little more stout in run support as well as pass coverage. Curious to see how that breaks down and really just kind of learn from you and your insights on this, because this is your
his
lane.
His footwork is so good. His footwork accounts for the 3 or 4 inches where he may not be as tall as some of these other guys, and just also the awareness of where the football is. And I don't think that's something that Auburn corners have always had. College corners have always had. I mean, it's tough. The ones that are good at that get drafted and make millions and millions of dollars. So I think Kayin Lee is going to make millions and millions of dollars one day. He may be now. Who knows what his NIL situation is. But I think I think it's Nehemiah Pritchett that'll run out first, because I don't think you want Nehemiah Pritchett to transfer, Lindsay. I think you have to start him at A-Day and make sure that he feels happy, because you need him. Even if you don't start Nehemiah Pritchett in the fall, you need him on the roster. And so I think you see 18 out there first, and I think you see Kayin Lee second, and I think you see Keontae Scott on the field, probably more as a nickel, but we'll certainly see what all that looks like.
Yeah, and that's that roster management point. That's always the tough part of this, right? That's that little bit of question that we have is, what are they thinking about off of the field? And in this case, like you said, it's depth, it's veteran experience. If Kayin Lee's the second guy, that's a true freshman out there. And so what happens if there's an injury? I understand the argument of we're going to take Nehemiah Pritchett and put him in there for first team reps just to be safe.
Regarding quarterback, we didn't start with quarterback, and we're not. And Lindsay, I just don't know how much it matters which quarterback runs out there first on Saturday. I think it'd be fun, regardless whoever it is. We're totally going to run with it. If it's TJ, if it's Robbie, if it's Holden Gerner, regardless of who's at quarterback, I think it's going to be fun to see. But
Sawyer Pate, maybe.
Sure, the GOAT. There's
only 5 on the roster. So
right, and only 3 on scholarship until the baby goat Hank Brown gets here. But I still think the starting quarterback, I don't think he's here yet. So I just have a hard time kind of saying that's the position battle to watch.
Yeah, it's something we've seen mixed reviews for all 3 guys. It feels like the last week or so, you've heard a lot more positive talk about Holden Gerner and what he's able to do in practice, what he's been doing with the ones and things like that. But as we've talked about the entire time, you're in a scenario where you can't get the entirety of a look at Robbie Ashford unless your quarterbacks are live. Right. And He's just now getting over being hurt in the fall. The last thing you want to do is make him live in the spring and him potentially get hurt again.
Well, it sounds like he's banged up now anyway. So like, how active is he at A-Day, right?
Yeah. And it's like in that case, you've got Holden Garron or TJ Finley are your only two scholarship quarterbacks at A-Day. And so obviously one, they're not active, but you can only learn so much when a guy is not afraid of being hit. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the big takeaway. And all of the draft prep and stuff like that you watch, all of it comes down to how does the guy respond when the pocket is collapsing? Can he still keep his eyes downfield? Can he still complete a pass when he can't step into it and all of that? And even in a live situation like this, unless you can get hit, which we're not going to do at A-Day, you don't really know how that guy's going to do because in the back of his head, he knows he's not in any danger. So that's the big question. We saw Holden Garron limited snaps last year, and obviously he looked like a deer in the headlights because it was his first snaps in college, and that was the offensive line he was behind.
It was a bad offensive line. It was a crappy offensive scheme. I mean, it's the poor kid, you know.
God, I'd have fired that guy who came up with that.
Yeah.
And so what are we going to learn? And like you said, is the guy, the starter, even on campus? And if he's not, where is he? Because if he's in the SEC, he can't transfer here. So
yeah, no, I don't think he's in the SEC. I do not think he is because he can't be. He can't be. Unless there's some weird waiver rules, which maybe that's part of it. I wouldn't bank on that because we're not Georgia, so we're just not going to get that. We're not going to get that treatment like they are. So, when you look at who trots out there first, do you expect them to do you expect whoever the starter is for A-Day to like be the starter for the entirety, or do you expect it to be like a true rotation? Like, do you think, let's say Robbie's the first one out there, or let's say TJ's the first one out there, because I don't know how they handle the whole Robbie's being hurt thing. So if TJ's out there first, do you give them 3 series and then you pull them, and then you give 3 to Robbie and then 3 to Holden, or do you say no? You're with the starters, you're with the 2s, you're with the 3. How do you expect that to look?
I think a lot of it's going to be, if it's me, what I want to see as a fan, I want to see the guys rotate because I want to see how each of the quarterbacks works with the number 1 wide receivers, the number 1 tight end, number 1 running back. That's what I want to see. Now, as a coaching staff, I don't know if they make a different decision because they're like, hey, we're going to make the roles, and we have the pecking order. We don't have a depth chart, but we have the pecking order. We're going to keep the guys in it. But as a fan, I want to see Cam Brown catch a back shoulder deep ball from Holden Garron. And then I want to see TJ Finley try it. I want to see, can he make that same pass? How does he look throw into these guys? Can anybody overthrow Nick Marnder? He's 6'6". Somebody's going to try. Probably TJ Finley, because he's the only one who's looking down, you know.
Yes, they can miss him. Yes.
Yeah. And so I want to see how they do with these guys. Does the giant catch radius of Nick Marnder outweigh the inaccuracy on the run of some of these quarterbacks? I want to see these things.
I get it. All right, coming up, Lindsay's going to share his 3 players he's most excited to see during A-Day. That coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Want to encourage you to join the Locked On Auburn Discord. It is free. All you have to do is click the link in the episode description down below on YouTube or audio. It is there. And also check out our written work at auburndaily.com. Lindsay, who are you most excited to see at A-Day on Saturday?
So let me preface this with saying that unlike most people who come on the show and things like that, I have not been going to practice. I have not been watching in spring in person and seeing all of these guys perform. So number 1 for me is number 15, Keldrick Falk. He's a freshman listed at 6'6", 275. And I think the big question for me, I've heard him described as an athletic, long pass rusher that works really well off the edge. I want to see, does Keldrick Falk, to me, I like to think somewhat informed observer watching from the stands, does he look like he belongs on an SEC defensive line in an SEC defense? Because we've talked about Elijah McAllister is going to be the guy to open the year. You brought him in for this reason. He's incredibly experienced. He's on like his 12th year of college. You know, he knows it's inside and out now.
Yeah.
But does Keldrick Falk physically and then the speed with which he plays, not only how fast does he move, but mentally, how quickly does he shift from, say, pass rushing to pursuit of a ball carrier, things like that? Does he play quick enough to be to make an impact in the SEC in the fall? And I just don't know that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I've heard, everything that I've seen, the numbers I've seen, 6'6", 275, all of that make me think that he is. But I need to see it for myself because as an outside observer, I'm a little bit nervous about the pass rush because you didn't necessarily go out and bring in a number 2 jack like you did last year where you end up having 3 guys and you needed them because you lost one of the top 3 because of Ekuliota's pectoral injury.
Yeah, I also wonder if they expected Dylan Brooks to be more at this point. And, you know, maybe can he turn it on? Can he put on a show on Saturday? We'll see. I think it's a good one. Yeah, everybody look for number 15, Keldrick Falk on Saturday. All right, who's your number 2?
Number 2 for me, kind of a cop-out, but the entire offensive line, right? We mentioned this in the previous segment. The offensive line has been so bad at Auburn for a couple of seasons now. Well, they do a ton of work. They bring in, if I count this right, they brought in 8 players for the offensive line between freshmen and transfers. You know, like Gunnar Britton, Avery Jones, Dylan Wade, Xavier Miller, and then Clay Whedon, Braden Joyner, Connor Liu, Tyler John. They brought in 8 players. And so, I mean, entirely new offensive line. You're looking at a brand new group. I want to see how well do they look playing together. It's hard to evaluate the pass protection when, again, quarterbacks aren't live. The rushers have a little bit of a pull up because they know they can't hit the quarterback. But I want to see run game wise, can they open holes? Do they look like they're playing together and that they're starting to build that chemistry? And then the big thing, because it really bugs me, and it's hard to evaluate in spring, but do they get false starts at home? Because that's one of those things I feel like our unit last year did way too much, was draw false starts at home.
Yeah.
So can they play as a cohesive unit? Can they, fire off the ball together? Can they make holes in the running game? That's what I want to see, because ultimately I think it doesn't matter who you have back there at quarterback if the offensive line isn't playing significantly better than they were last year.
Sure. No, I get it. Last name before we wrap up.
Last name, safety Marquise Gilbert, number 14.
I love that.
He was the number 1 JUCO college safety before he came to Auburn. Right. Only got in 4 games last year. Some of it was health related, from what I understand. He didn't make his first tackle till Mississippi State later in the schedule.
He got here late too.
Yeah. So he's had a full year. He's had a full off season. What can he do? And can he take one of those safety spots? Because a lot of the conversation we've had has been about the versatility of a Donovan Kaufman, some of these other guys, but you have to have stability on the back end to be able to take a guy like Donovan Kaufman and move him around to different positions. So going to be watching for Marquise Gilbert. He's got the size, the 6'2", the long length that you like to see in the secondary. If you go back and you look at his JUCO stats, more than 50 tackles, 2 interceptions. Like, he's got the physicality you need to come down and run support. How does he do over the top, defending the deep ball? Can he get a starting spot on this defense? Because I think it opens a lot of options for you with some of your hybrid players.
So I'm a big Patriots fan, and so this statement may be a little biased, but when I watch him, I see Kyle Duggar, who has become an exceptional player in the league. He's a D2 guy, right? Mm-hmm. And drafted in the 2nd round as a D2 player. Like, from the JUCO ranks to the SEC, like, it probably took him a second. It probably took him a season to adjust. And I mean, you're not really hearing a whole lot about Donovan Kaufman. So, like, I kind of wonder, could Marquise Gilbert be a starting safety next to Jalen Simpson? And I think he could. So I love that one. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. My show, Locked On MLB Prospects, available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. You can find the Auburn baseball writing, auburndaily.com. And also, I am editor-in-chief of bravestoday.com.
You can find all my written work at auburndaily.com as well. And we will see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.